Hi, Bill.
How are you doing today, Tony?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Great. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem.
Gosh, I mean, everyone tells you sound just like Wally.
Amazing, huh? Amazing that happens. I didn't trade in my voice, I guess.
I guess not. It's but I guess talking about the appeal of this show is that it was about two kids being natural, being themselves in some ways, and I think that's and they happened to stumble upon two kid actors who knew how to be themselves, didn't they?
Yeah. I think that that's a big part of the charm of the show, is that everybody could identify with one or more of the characters in the show, and it was a real honest. It was an honest show. There was no fabricating of goofy stories or gimmicks or gags. As a matter of fact, an interesting fact is that they would we'd have a reading, and if a line got too big of a laugh, they'd take it out because they didn't want laughs. They wanted a lot of chuckles. They wanted people smiling throughout the show as opposed to laughing at jokes. So it was an interesting concept.
That is interesting. Yeah, it's too bad, and time goes by, and society as a whole seems to start taking a look at the 50s, all that canon of great sitcoms and shows that came out of the 50s, and sort of dismissing them. But there was a lot of thought and a lot of conceptual thinking that went into the creation of some of those shows, and I think Leave It to Beaver was one of them.
Yeah, well, I think Beaver actually, I guess maybe I'm biased, but I think it was one of the best shows at representing the best of American family life. Although Beaver had his problems navigating through the system, but I think that it was really representative of, and our stories, which if you go back and look at them, there's usually a theme to a story, and the theme. Let's say a theme is you can never go back. So the story's about Ward trying to go back to his old fishing hole and taking his family and hoping to have a great time and finding out that the fishing hole is stocked and the drive-in movies right next door. So that it's like you can never go back. So that's a story that's a universal story. It's timeless, and most of the stories tended to be that way.
Yeah.
The guys had like 7 or 9 kids between them. I can't remember now.
How many shows how many episodes a season did they do back in those days? A lot, right?
39.
39 shows.
Yeah.
That's like a full run for a series anymore, going over 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
As great as Hugh Beaumont and Barbara Billingsley were, I've been thinking back over shows over the past several decades, and most sitcoms or most half-hour comedy shows like this seem to use the parents as the filter. Like the whole show is kind of told through Raymond's eyes. But Leave It to Beaver seemed, in retrospect, to be unusual in that it really did focus on the interplay between the two brothers. It was a show about two brothers.
Well, yeah. I mean, the approach to the show is completely different than I think any other show. I mean, maybe Wonder Years later on captured the same feeling, but basically it was these two brothers, one who's a kid and sort of struggling through, and the other one who is kind of acts as a interpreter between the adults and the child. So basically, it was the only show that the stories were told from the child's point of view. I mean, it was a conscious effort. I mean, that's what the show was about. It was about the kids trying to figure out what the adult world's about and why things work the way they do. And I think it's a fascinating concept. The problem, of course, is that as an adult, you can't write that kind of stuff because you're an adult. And one of the theories of the show is that there is adult and there's children, and they don't look at the world the same way. They don't interpret things the same way. So it's hard to write a show from that point of view. But as I said, these guys had 9 kids, so they drew on stories from their kids.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that, because that's interesting.
Well, the writers, Joe Conley and Bob Mosher, had, and it's amazing, I can't remember, either 7 or 9 kids, but Joe Conley had a kid that was basically Beaver. That was Ricky. That was his name. It was Ricky. And then Jay, who was his older brother, was kind of the Wally character. And that's kind of the way they were patterned after. So, this wasn't a contrived show. It was a show that was sort of written from observation of what kids go through. And then, of course, Joe Conley and Bob Mosier, great writers, had the ability to really look at the world from a kid's point of view.
I often wonder, people who've had your experience, that they growing up, with your real childhood and this pretend childhood that you lived several days a week. Did you feel like you had two childhoods, or did you totally separate things out?
Probably had no childhood. I think it was pretty separate. I mean, there was work, which was very demanding. I mean, it was a 8-9 hour day. By the time you left the house and got home, it was like a 10-hour day, I guess. And then there was my own family and my own stuff. But you kind of have a lot of obligations that go along with when you're working. You've got lines you've got to learn. I got schoolwork and homework I've got to do, like everybody. But so it isn't quite the cakewalk that everybody thinks it is.
I think as years go by, people realize more and more that it isn't. I think there was the fantasy that was created, perhaps even by the industry in those days, that it might be.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't, I guess. Tell me a little bit about your sculpture work, because I find that really interesting. I've seen some of your stuff online. It's really, really nice.
Thank you. Well, I've always been interested in art since I was on the show, as a matter of fact. And I started doing some welding in copper, or actually brazing in copper, when I was late teens and early 20s. And then I sort of took a go at traveling around to the various art shows, that like the Laguna Art Show or the Del Mar Art Show, and with my sculptures. And then the problem, of course, is that people buy things there, so if you want to sell things, you have to make things that are inexpensive and that people will buy, and I didn't like doing that, so that was sort of a short-lived attempt at art. But I had always had in my mind that when I retired, I would, the vision is that you have a little shack by the sea and a big barn workshop somewhere, and you work on stuff all day, and of course send it out and become famous. But that doesn't work that way either, I don't think. But,
life is full of lessons at different stages, isn't it?
Yeah, right. But so anyway, that was my plan, and then I kind of started working on these things maybe 15 years ago, and then it just sort of progressed. And then when directing kind of slowed down for me, because that's what my vocation was for many years, I started getting into it, more heavily. And it's interesting because all those pieces that are online, I suspect, are done in a couple-year period, most of them in 2002, but some in 2003. And, now I do it. Now I'm working on a series that's a different kind of thing. It's much more abstract, and it's not figurative. It's it's just a process you do. It's hard because you certainly can't do what other people. You can't figure out what other people want to be successful as a selling artist. And if you're with the curve, if you're doing things that sell, which is what everybody else is doing, then it's kind of not as original as you'd like it to be. So it's this weird dance. So I'm fortunate that I don't have to live by my art. I can do whatever the hell I want. Yeah. And then if somebody likes it, great. And if they don't, it'll end up in a garage somewhere.
Well, that's great. Listen, Tony, I think that's all I need. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
And you take care. Have a good time.
I appreciate the talk. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.